We wanted to record this. And so just wanted to make sure that everyone consents to being recorded today. If you feel uncomfortable for any reason, feel free to take yourself off video or, change your name if necessary. Thanks. Sorry, Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Janine. This is obviously an exciting day for us. When we came into office last January, one of the first things we did was launch that We Build Bethlehem process, where we wanted to really get some community feedback and community input as we put together a vision for what type of post-pandemic investments we were going to make in the city of Bethlehem. And that obviously was all possible by the American Rescue Plan. And the fact that our senators, Bob Casey and our Congresswoman Susan Wild, were able to get that passed 2 years ago have really given us this opportunity to not be reactive as we often are, but proactive as far as making those investments in the community. So we launched that We Build Bethlehem process in 2022. Those survey results were shared in October in our November budget. We put forward some dollars into what we call the Community Recovery Fund, and I know I see several folks from City Council on the call who I want to thank. I see Kira and Hillary here, so thank you for the support of the creation of this fund. And what we're trying to do here is really create a permanent and sustainable opportunity for the city to invest into our community, into the people on the front lines that are doing the work, that are really making those systemic investments into our community. And one of the things we're going to talk about is that we put an allocation in the budget for $3 million, but that is going to go through several rounds and last several years with the idea that we want to create this permanent, sustainable opportunity to support the organizations. There are some things that the city does, but a lot of work that's going on within our city, within our community, it's being done by people on the front lines with these organizations, and we want to support them. Similar to the Community Development Block Grant program that we have seen for years, we want to create an easier, more streamlined version of that. This program is going to be consistent with our mission of our pandemic recovery goals. We want to assist people in the short term and the long term, and we want to make systemic investments to prevent the problem, so we're not always playing catch up. This is really another big day for us as a community as we start to make these investments. As I said before, our United States Senator Bob Casey was in town a couple weeks ago to talk about how much he appreciated our vision as a city and as a community for what these pandemic dollars are going to, what they're going to look like and how they're going to get out to the folks that are helping to deliver these services. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody for coming. I'm going to turn over to our Director of Equity Inclusion, Janine Santoro, for a couple of minutes before Laura and Mason get into some more details of the program.
Thank you, Mayor, and welcome everyone. It's so good to see so many familiar faces and some new faces. So some of this will be a repetition of what the Mayor just said, but it bears repeating. The Community Recovery Fund was born out of this once-in-a-generation opportunity called the American Rescue Plan Act, which was passed to help respond to COVID-19 and its social and economic impacts. And so our administration sees COVID-19 as the great revealer, meaning that we recognize that while social inequities had existed before the pandemic exacerbated them in a way that's undeniable and requires recovery efforts in a hyperlocal and systemic way so that our frontline communities are given the quality of life that they deserve. And so it's through this lens that the Community Recovery Fund was created. It's a fund that recognizes that our community partners are our trusted messengers and are the most capable in helping our constituents in a personal, immediate way that City Hall does not always have the capacity to do. The Community Recovery Fund seeks to empower our organizations to fill the gaps in a number of priority areas that our constituents told us about in our survey from 2022. And we do not see this fund as free money, but rather a very literal investment in our organizations to provide sustainable solutions and become proactive in preventing detrimental or life-altering situations. So successful applications will be the ones that demonstrate how the proposed program or project that you are putting forth addresses the negative impacts of COVID-19 on the community and rebuild services with an emphasis on equity for long-term transformation within the city of Bethlehem. The Community Recovery Fund was created in a way that we hope is experienced as a less cumbersome process in its design and its implementation, with equity being ingrained in not only the purpose for the funds, but in the very process of applying for the funds. We try to do this by making the application less regulatory than our community development block grant process, which is confined to HUD regulations. We are expanding the types of organizations that can apply by encouraging not only 501c3 nonprofits to apply, but other community-based organizations that may not have been eligible for funding in the past due to inflexible deadlines or requirements. We have tried to keep required attached documents to a minimum to decrease barriers in applying and to decrease your overall application time. And we are able to provide a longer 2-year timeline for spending larger grant amounts that are given at the time to support urgent projects and provide reoccurring future opportunities for applying for these funds. And finally, if an organization seeks to apply for funds in a language other than English, we do have translation that can be provided. So all that being said, and to dive into the details, we have Laura Collins, our Director of Community and Economic Development, and our Grants Administrator, Mason Allen. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Janine. And that was such a helpful introduction and great information. We'll touch on a lot of the points that Janine just made in a little more detail as we go through the slides, as we talk about eligibility, as we talk about program timelines, things like that. But so as Mayor Reynolds and Janine have explained, the Community Recovery Fund is a reoccurring grant opportunity for community organizations and nonprofits in Bethlehem. Mason, if you want to go ahead to the next slide. Great. So at the end of last year, as the mayor said, Bethlehem City Council supported the creation of this fund and approved a $3 million allocation for the Community Recovery Fund line item. In 2023, in this first round of grant funding, we're going to be distributing up to $750,000 in grants to these organizations that are serving Bethlehem residents and that fit within the objectives and requirements that we're going to be talking about throughout this presentation. As the mayor said, we want to allocate a portion of the total $3 million in this first round to guarantee additional availability moving forward. If your organization is new, if you have a program idea in mind, and maybe the idea of getting an application together by the April 30th deadline is a little daunting, we want people to rest assured that there will be additional opportunities to apply down the road. So the goals then for today's information session are to give you this first opportunity to learn about this grant program. We know that you are probably asking, what is this all about? Who is it for? How can I apply? So those are the things that we're going to try and cover today in a basic framing of the larger context. So the reasons behind the formation of this fund, which are emphasizing, as Janine said, accessibility, equity, and opportunity. So after today's sessions, you'll be able to read, we have our written guidelines, which are going to provide all of this information with even greater detail. Those will be available on the city's website, and we'll show you how to navigate to that. And then you should also keep in mind important future dates. Again, we have today's session. Today is also when written guidelines will be available. March 1st, the application portal will open, and that application portal is called Neighborly, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And that'll be accessible on the city's website. And then also around March 1st, March 2nd, we will have a technical tutorial on the application process and how to use that Neighborly software. So, as we've said, we are looking through this grant funding opportunity to provide resources, make investments in the areas of most need in our community. So to help determine what the problems are that are most pressing, what the needs are that are greatest for residents in the city of Bethlehem, we surveyed people in the city of Bethlehem. We had an outreach and engagement effort. We talked about this during a presentation in October when we presented the We Build Bethlehem survey results. But we asked residents to help prioritize 22 categories of possible project areas based on the need. So project areas such as food assistance, senior service, rental assistance. We put 22 different buckets out for people to comment on and prioritize. And we reached hundreds of Bethlehem residents between April and October of last year. We were out in person, we were at local events, we were at community centers, food pantries, public meetings, and then had a number of online outreach efforts. So by analyzing then the data that came in from this survey, also engaging with our own community partners, conducting some research, and reviewing the existing landscape of public and social services, as well as additional funding sources. We know that there is a dizzying array of grant opportunities. There are a number of federal, state, and local programs that are aimed to address some of the most pressing needs in our communities, particularly housing, homelessness, and other pandemic, recovery areas. We wanted to survey that landscape and think about where we, as the city of Bethlehem, with the help of the federal American Rescue Plan dollars, where we could best make meaningful impact and potentially fill some gaps that might not be filled by other program opportunities. So we really realized that of all of the areas that we surveyed, the 22 categories, there is need across the board. So what we did in the 2023 budget, again, with the great leadership of Bethlehem City Council, we created 3 different funding sources in the budget. We have a $5 million line item for affordable housing, a $2 million line item for homelessness initiatives, and then this $3 million line item for the Community Recovery Fund, and that supports this grant program. So in determining how to be most effective with this fund, we're focusing on the priority areas that are separate from housing and homelessness, because we do have those separate funding sources to help us with those top priority initiatives. And, we could talk at length about the work that we're doing in those areas. We've in the space of homelessness, we're taking initial recommendations of our strategic plan to address homelessness to leverage dollars through HUD to support the eventual establishment of a permanent year-round emergency shelter to fill needs identified by our service providers. And then in the area of affordable housing, we're currently engaging in a comprehensive housing strategy study. And from there, we're going to be prioritizing housing strategies to supplement the work that we're already doing. And we'll be using that budget line item to help us carry out those strategies in the housing space. So again, in the Community Recovery Fund, we're prioritizing additional project areas other than housing and homelessness. And I'm going to turn it over now to Mason to talk a little bit more about those funding areas, our funding objectives, and she'll also then walk through eligibility criteria. So with that, go ahead, Mason.
Thanks, Laura. So the Community Recovery Fund will prioritize funding projects that align with these 16 categories. So we don't intend to tell you exactly which projects would or would not fit into these categories, nor do we intend to tell you to indicate any preference over one category versus another. But we do encourage you to interpret these projects as broadly as possible to include a wide variety of potential programs or projects. And we'll be looking at these projects that touch one or even more of these priority areas more favorably. So these 16 priority areas are arts and culture, childcare support, climate justice, community center, economic development, education and literacy, food assistance, high-speed internet, job training, mental health and counseling, parks and recreation, public communication tools, public health, senior services, utility assistance, and violence prevention. And we'd also like to point out that this list is non-exhaustive. So there may be projects that serve the community that don't necessarily fall into one of these priority areas, and that's okay. You're still encouraged to apply. But as Laura mentioned, housing and homelessness are not on this list. But with that being said, we still will consider housing and homelessness initiatives, especially if they also touch one of these priority areas listed here. Now, to be eligible, you must be a nonprofit or community organization. So a nonprofit that has that 501c3, 501c6, or 501c19 status. But then also for community organizations, in our view, that's an organization that may not have that nonprofit status, but is nonetheless serving a community as a nonprofit would, and is not operating as a business. So we wanted to keep that eligibility open. But with that in mind, there are still required documents that community organizations will have to provide during the application that will help, prove their legitimacy. So those required documents and all those requirements will be laid out very clearly in the grant guidelines. And then this eligibility is just, another way that we're really trying to keep this grant as accessible as possible. We don't want to disqualify organizations who are doing this really important work, but don't have that nonprofit status. And then the final part of that is that the organization must also be serving residents in Bethlehem. And then moving on, as we put together the details of this grant program, we also pulled from the best practices in other communities and also consulted heavily with professionals throughout City Hall, to make sure that we were administering the program as responsibly as possible and that it was all in line with our mission. So that's how we came up with some criteria that would make an entity ineligible. First of all, for-profit businesses are not eligible. This grant program is not intended to provide business assistant grants directly to individual business owners, like we saw given out during the height of the pandemic. So business entities will not be eligible for the Community Recovery Fund. Next, organizations established after March 1st, 2022. While we encourage newer and smaller entities to apply for funding, we're asking that an entity have been operating for at least 1 year prior to applying. This will allow us to have some guarantee of an organization's viability to be able to actually carry out this program or project with community fund dollars. And then our third ineligibility is that it cannot be a religious organization or institution that does not offer secular programming. So just to be clear on this one, this does not exclude religious organizations entirely, because we know there are a lot out there that do offer a lot of anti-poverty services. However, the programs or projects that are offered must be open to the public regardless of religious affiliation. And then the last disqualifier is that organizations that are engaged in any illegal activity under federal, state, or local law are not eligible. Now, we're sure that many of your largest questions remain unanswered. For example, how much money can you apply for and what can it be used for? So during this grant cycle, we will be awarding grants with a tentative range of $10,000 to $75,000 per program or project. With this range, we're envisioning the possibility to help smaller organizations reach new potential with maybe even a grant that's on the smaller side in this range, but would be absolutely transformative for them. But then we also, envision helping more established organizations carry out new programs or projects with a higher dollar amount in this range, leaning on the capacity that they've already built. But what we're not looking for, as you can tell, is to fund any singular $1 million or $2 million projects. So once again, this grant awards will range from $10,000 to $75,000. And as in terms of the eligibility, we've kind of left it fairly broad because we wanted to offer as much opportunity as possible to folks applying. So the eligible uses of funds include funding for new programs or projects. So this would be any new project or program that you were looking to partially or totally fund with this grant. We'll also be funding existing programs or projects. So if your organization has a project or program, for example, let's say a food pantry that needs funds to either expand the project or continue it as is, that would be an eligible use. And in our experience looking into other grants and administering other grants, such as our community development block grant, we know that sometimes regulations can limit where funding can go. For example, if funding can go to salaries or not for an already existing program, it often gives preference to brand new programs instead. But this is not the case here. We want to hear from you in your applications on what you need to make the greatest impact. So whether it's bringing a brand new project to fruition or keeping one going that already exists. So an additional funding option is funding for capital expenditures of $10,000 or more. So this would be, construction projects, reconstruction projects, any kind of repair work. And, here again, we are trying to provide flexibility for this eligible use of funds. But I will note that if you have a construction project that is over $25,000, there may be some additional requirements, including adhering to prevailing wage laws. And additionally, we will also be funding supplies, materials, and salaries of employees being utilized by the program the applicant is seeking to fund. So here we want you to notice that we are permitting the use of grant funds for things like salaries. We recognize that not all grants allow for that, and there may be some need in your organization to have a funding source to pay the people who would actually be critical in creating a new project or running an existing project. And then additionally, we will be allowing funds to be used for equipment that will be utilized for the program the applicant is seeking funding for. Like I said, the use of these funds are designed to be broad. We want applicants to be able to use this money for a variety of different needs at their organization. But with that in mind, there are, however, some ineligible use of funds. So when determining the ineligible uses of funds, we again consulted the city's legal team and reviewed similar grants distributed by cities through Pennsylvania. So the ineligible uses of funds include financing the use of facilities or equipment for political purposes or to engage in other partisan political activities. So, for example, the money can't be used for an election campaign. Additionally, the funds can't exceed 50% of the organization's total projected annual expenses. So what we're thinking here is organizational and project viability. So the funds you receive from the city would be, if they would be more than half of your organization's expenses for the year, we would have some concerns about that. So what we'll be asking is for a projected budget that includes the requested funds and shows roughly how those funds compare to the full budget of your organization. And then additionally, funds cannot be used for non-secular programming, which would be religious programming. And I just want to reiterate here that this does not exclude religious organizations from applying. It just means that the programming that is being offered must be available to the public. Okay, and then moving on to the application process. So what we've laid out over these past few slides are the goals of the grant program, as well as the types of projects we intend to fund, the eligibility requirements from organizations and for programs, and what might be some disqualifying characteristics as well. All of that was presented today, as we said at the beginning, is just to give you a basic information to start thinking about the application before the 2-month application process begins. So we hope this will help you, start to plan and spark discussion and conversation at your organizations before you should apply, figuring out if you should apply and for what programs or projects. We're hoping that starting this process early and giving you this information a month before the application opens will help relieve some of that pressure when the actual application does open. So when it does open on March 1st, you'll be able to begin the process of reviewing the actual application questions, drafting answers within the word count of each question, and also collecting the documentation that is needed so that you can submit it all together on or before April 30th. So on March 1st, anyone will be able to access the application. It will be available on the city's website, and I'll show you how to access that on later slides. But on the city's website, you'll be able to click on a link to enter our application portal, which is hosted by our grant software, Neighborly. So once that portal opens, you'll be able to create an account, enter the application, and begin answering the questions. You can enter and exit the application as many times as you want, and you'll be able to save information wherever you're at in the progress of the application before you actually hit the final submission, which you'll have to do before the deadline of April 30th. I just want to reiterate the applications will only be accepted via Neighborly application portal. But we know that some folks have not used this software before, and we want to make it as accessible as possible. So we will be offering technical assistance on how to use Neighborly. So on March 1st, we'll host a live tutorial via Zoom for anyone who wants to learn how to use this application portal, how to make an account and how to access the Community Recovery Fund grant application. And then if you're not able to make it on March 1st, or if you want to go back and review the tutorial, it will also be recorded and uploaded onto the city's website. Now, the actual application, you will be able to see in full when the application opens on March 1st. But for the purposes of planning, we wanted to give you a high-level overview of what we're looking for. So in our efforts to make this grant as accessible as possible for folks, we wanted to, try to limit the number of application questions while also doing our best to collect all the necessary information. So the application will be broken down into the 5 sections you see listed here. So first, the contact information. This section is where we'll ask the applicant to fill in their contact info, their email address, phone number, as well as the name of the organization they're applying on behalf of, and the federal tax ID number of the organization. Secondly, we'll have the organization information. This is the section where applicants will be able to tell us more about the organization's mission, as well as the demographic information about the populations they serve. The third section is the program information. So in this section, this is where we're asking, how much the applicant is requesting for this project or program. We also want to know essentially all the details about the program here. So this is where you can add your program or project narrative. And we'll also be looking for some information about how many residents, Bethlehem residents, this project is intended to serve, and how you'll measure the success of this program or project. Moving on to the 4th section, we have the funding and budget. In this section, we're just looking to learn more about all the funding sources that your organization currently has for your program or project. So to complete this section, you'll need to have the records of grants your organization may have received for this program or project from any other sources. And then another thing to note here while we're talking about the funding is that we will be prioritizing projects and programs that are not currently receiving funds from the city. Additionally, while we're reviewing the applications, we'll also look into other available funding sources and see if your project better fits the criteria of one of those opportunities. And then lastly, the last section on the application is the required documents. So this is where the applicant can upload copies of the necessary documentation we require. This will be, like the IRS W-9 form and a proposed budget narrative for this project or program. So we anticipate that all applications are collected and the applications have closed on April 30th, and our review and selection process will run through the summer. It currently remains to be seen how many applications we will receive for this sort and what kind of decisions we'll have to make when selecting which programs and projects to fund. So we will be reviewing applications internally, and we'll be following a process that's very similar to the one the city has used for a long time for our community development block grant funds. So applications will be evaluated by identifying the proposed project or program's impact on the community and the overall effectiveness of the program. Our review will include continued consideration of the principles and objectives that we have talked about today. We're looking for a balance of short and long-term pandemic recovery with an additional focus on systemic and sustainable solutions for these pressing issues that our residents face. Everything will be approached through this lens of equity, as Janine had mentioned, and we're prioritizing organizations and programs that serve marginalized communities. So with that being said, accessing this information on our city's website. So you'll navigate to www.bethlehem-pa.gov onto the city's website. And then from our homepage, you're just going to hover over departments here and then click on community and economic development. From here, there's the Community Recovery Fund. It's the yellow rectangle in the bottom right-hand corner on the main page of the Community and Economic Development page. And then on there, you'll be able to access all the information about the grant. And we'll be continuing to add more information to this page as it's available. So once this recording is done today, we will add it, and we'll also add the guidelines up there for you to review. All right, take it away, Laura.
All right, this is Laura Collins again. Thank you so much, Mason, for the presentation. And I know Mason may have been receiving some questions as she was speaking, and did not expect you to be doing double duty with speaking and reviewing. But if there are some that you want to pass over to me, we can take a look at those momentarily. As far as next steps, though, we are going to ask everyone attending here to sign up for updates on the Community Recovery Fund via a link on the city's website. We also, for ease, can put that, I believe, in the chat for you now. And if not, we'll also be sending it by email to everybody who registered for this session. So in any of those avenues, make sure that you sign up for the updates. We will be sending out updates when the application opens and when you're able to view the technical tutorial, if that's something of interest to you. And we will also use the Community Recovery Fund mailing list to send out notifications when the application deadline is approaching. So please certainly sign up for that. You can also, after this session, by the end of the day today, we should have the Community Recovery Fund grant guidelines up on the city's website, again, at the same location that Mason just directed you to. And that will allow you to take an even deeper dive into all of the areas that we discussed here on the program eligibility and whatnot. Then on or after March 1st, you'll be able to access the application via the link to Neighborly on the city's website. And at that time, you will also see the live and recorded technical tutorial link so you can watch that video. As well, the session that we are having here today, as you know, is being recorded. So we will have that on the website. It will be available to you if you feel like you've missed anything, or if there's anything that was unanswered, but that, you want to come back and check it out. That'll be up on the city's website. So I think that is what we have here for the scripted portion of our presentation. And from what I can tell, I only see just a few questions. But the first, actually, Mason, if you could help out, there was a request to show slides 1 and 2 again on the 1 and 2 on access. I believe that would mean, I think that means access to the city website.
Oh, sure.
Apologize. So again, yes, if you want to navigate to the City of Bethlehem website, as Mason said, this would be the home page. On that home page, here's just a zoomed in. You hover over departments and click on Community and Economic Development. And from there, you'll then go to the third slide here. That's what the Community Economic Development homepage looks like, and where you can click the link. And if I misunderstood that question, please feel free to send it back to me again. The second question I have is, we are a nonprofit that serves people with disabilities living in Bethlehem, but also other areas, and we are based in Allentown. Would we still be eligible to apply? We are looking for organizations that serve Bethlehem residents, but we are not requiring that your organization is physically located in the city of Bethlehem. But as the guidelines will lay out pretty specifically, the written grant guidelines, we do ask, or we are looking for more than 50% of the clients or individuals served by your organization and program or project to be Bethlehem residents. Another question is, if my organization is too new to qualify in 2023, will we be likely to qualify in the second wave of grant making? Anyone who is too new to qualify in 2023 would certainly be encouraged, absolutely, to apply in future cycles of the grant program, second, third, or otherwise. And through each phase of this grant program, we will be evaluating what other resources have been made available to a certain organization or program or project, and certainly what other city administered resources have previously been made available. So if you're an organization that is too new to qualify this year, you apply in the second wave, you've not therefore received a first round of funding through the Community Recovery Fund, I would say that project and program, if otherwise eligible and in line with the project priorities, would be a good candidate. And yes, to the person who asked if the questions are only being sent to city staff, the answer is yes. That's why you're not seeing them. But those are the only questions that we have received. I believe if there are others that we may want to consolidate into frequently asked questions on the website, we will do that. And if you have questions that you want to send after you've had a chance to digest the presentation today, you can send those to Mason Allen, and her email is here on this slide. It's mallen@bethlehem-pa.gov. All right. So that's all that we have for today. I am so grateful for everybody taking the time and appreciate your interest in serving the residents of Bethlehem, in helping us recover from the pandemic, and really making this program effective on so many levels and for so many people. We're really overwhelmed and excited by the interest. So thank you so much. And if Mayor Reynolds, if you had anything else you wanted to close with, certainly give you the opportunity to do that.
I just want to I want to thank all of the community partners that came out today, and I also want to thank the city staff, Mason and Laura and Alicia and Sarah and everybody else who's spending a lot of time trying to come up with a process that reflects what we know people in the community want. It's not just resources, but resources that can be utilized in a way that is worth their time. That is, we understand that it takes time to administer grants and things like that. And we've spent a lot of time trying to balance between being as responsible as you possibly can with every dollar versus also allowing organizations the flexibility on the time side to be able to get funds. And I want to thank all of the city staff who really have been working hard over the past couple of months to be able to do this. And as I said, I think it's an exciting day. And obviously the interest, we had over 100 people sign up today to be interested in this. I know a lot of organizations had multiple people here, and we really feel it's just the beginning of another long-term funding source. So it's an exciting day for us, and we can't wait as well for the next steps.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.